Welcome to Muscle Research Review for the week of April 20th, 2015. Quick research summaries for the very busy health and fitness professional. So let's get started. Our first study asked the question, is repetition failure critical for the development of muscle hypertrophy and strength? Now, the study looked at 28 males who completed a 12-week unilateral elbow flexor resistance program 3 times per week at 85% of 1 rep max. Now, the groups were divided into non-failure rapid shortening, non-failure stretch shortening, and failure control. All groups had an increase in 1 rep max, maximum voluntary contraction, and cross-sectional area. However, there was no between group differences, showing that repetition failure may not be critical in eliciting significant neural and structural changes to skeletal muscle. Now, however, what would have been interesting to see how adaptation to the same stimulus is going to affect long-term results. What are your thoughts on this study? Does it change how you prescribe weight training to your patients or clients? Staying on the topic of muscle hypertrophy, another study looked at the effects of low versus high load resistance training on muscle strength and hypertrophy in well-trained men. The study took 18 experienced men who performed 3 sets of 7 exercises representing all major muscle groups. Now, the exercise was carried out 3 times per week for about 8 weeks. The men were divided into 2 groups. The low load group, where 25 to 35 repetitions were performed per exercise, and a high load routine where 8 to 12 reps were performed. Now, the results were as follows. Both groups produced significant increase in muscle thickness. Now, the results were similar between the 2 groups. There was a greater improvement in back squat strength and 1 rep maximum bench press in the high load group. Upper body muscle endurance, judged by bench press at 50% of 1 rep maximum to failure, improved in a greater extent in the low load group. In summary, both groups showed similar hypertrophy. However, if your goal is to increase strength, high load training is the way to go. If the goal is to build muscle endurance, then a low load routine would be more beneficial. Now we move from training to rehab. A new study looked at the effect of different exercise programs on cervical flexor muscle dimensions in patients with chronic neck pain. If you've ever treated neck pain with an active rehabilitation program, you know that craniocervical flexion and cervical flexion exercises are often used. The study found that the craniocervical flexion group showed a significant increase in longus colli muscle cross-sectional area, while the cervical flexion group showed an increase in the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Now, pain intensity and disability actually decreased in both groups. Putting it into practice, if you want to target the deep neck flexors, use craniocervical flexion exercises. If you want to target the sternocleidomastoid muscle, go with the cervical flexor exercises. It's also interesting to note that the craniocervical flexion exercise had actually no effect on the sternocleidomastoid, showing that each exercise is very specific to what it targets. We finish off with a systematic review for the risk factors for groin injury in sport. Out of 2,521 relevant studies, 29 were included and scored. They found level 1 and level 2 evidence for the following risk factors: previous groin injury, higher level play, reduced hip adductor strength, both absolute and relative to the hip abductors, and lower levels of sport-specific training. Now, putting it into practice, a good screening program on muscle strength and an effective training program can go a long way to have a significant impact on the risk of future groin injuries. If you have a comment, leave it below. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel to continue staying up to date on the latest research reviews. See you guys next time.